how do I come up with the names and words and fantasy language in my writing? I was asked about this recently and was specifically asked if it's a case of just slapping together some syllables that sound good together. It definitely can be that, and that's where some of my names start out. Naming fantasy characters and places, things that just sound good, is a totally legit way to do it, and you can absolutely stop there if that's as far as you want to take it. The other end of that spectrum is the Tolkien route, where you spend years putting together a whole constructed language. Then you come up with dialects and prefixes and suffixes and names and places that fit into the world and make sense in that world. If you want to go that route, that's a huge undertaking, but have at it. For my own Teshovar series, I fall somewhere in the middle. When I'm writing these books, I'm building a world that I want to feel cohesive and lived in. As part of that, I want the names to make sense for the characters and locations and everything else. There is a fantasy language in Teshovar called Avash that is no longer actively spoken, but it's still used in some contexts for secret religious and magical practices. I kind of think of Avash as my fantasy version of Latin. There are some regions of Teshovar where Avash had more of a hold for a longer period of time, and the characters that come from that region in the present time in the story have names that kind of match the sounds that I imagine Avash having in my head. There are a lot of long A sounds and a lot of silent H's and things like that. Now, I'm not a linguist like Tolkien was, and I don't know the whole Avash language. I add words to it as needed by the story, and when I do that, I do start by figuring out what sounds good to me and fits into the narrative I'm telling. Then I try to make that fit into what I've already created and established about the language previously. In that way, I try to make the names and words and all of that feel real and natural without having to go to the lengths of building an entire language. Who knows what I'll have by the time I finish the series, though. And another thing I do when naming characters that is more a practical thing than an aesthetic one is that I try to make all the characters have as unique as possible of names visually for the reader. I've read so many fantasy books where there are 7 characters that have very similar names, and I always end up confused. So I keep a running list of the character names that I've already used. Whenever I need to name a new character, I come up with something that sounds good and that fits in with the world and matches what I imagine the character would be, but then I also check the list to verify that I haven't already used something for a major character that's too similar to that. That's less important for very minor characters that only get mentioned once or twice, but even then I do try to keep them as unique as I can while still being reasonable. So that's a high-level description of how I come up with fantasy names and words in my Teshovar series.